Everyone, my name is Annelie. I'm the social worker at Ekklesia Park. It is my great pleasure today to welcome each and every one of you for joining us today for this listening to Dr. Nelia Drent on this very relevant topic, which I believe is relevant to all of us in our lives. So a very special welcome also to Dr. Nelia. We are very happy that you could join us for today, and we're looking forward to listening to you. I know you said I don't need to say a lot about you because you are just here by grace, but I would like to do a very short introduction because I don't want to take a lot of your time. Nelia is a social worker in private practice in Pretoria, and she specializes in grief therapy and also illness-related loss and end-of-life care. She's done her master's in social work in health at the University of Pretoria and her PhD at the Northwest University. Nelia is very passionate about her work, and she do a lot of talks and workshops, and is also serving on a few social work related boards, including is the vice chair of the board of a hospice called Sun Gardens, I think, in Pretoria. And she has 5 children. That includes her son and daughter-in-law, and she's a very proud grandmother, and she's happily married to Render. So also, I just want to mention from Ekklesia's Park point of view on this topic is something that is very relevant to us. We find that most people, by the time that they decide to come or move into a care home, has often suffered multiple losses. That could be the loss of a life partner, deterioration in their health following a hospital admission because of a fall, a stroke, and also then, as you can imagine, as many of you will know, having to leave their own homes, leaving their belongings behind, moving and adjusting to new circumstances. The same for their children. When I'm doing admissions in the 7 months that I've been at Ekklesia Park, at the admissions that I've done with people wanting to come and stay here, I've been through that process with many families. So it isn't always this clear-cut thing of, okay, just the decision that I've made to come into a care home. It often is a result of complex traumas that they have suffered. The same for our current residents, having to deal with deterioration in their health. Also mental health often is a factor, and also for their family having to be on this journey with them. But it's a topic that's relevant for all of us. Most of us, or someone close to you, I don't think there's anyone here today that can say that they've never suffered loss and experienced loss or bereavement or trauma as a result. So just to say again, we're recording the session and we will send that out to you later on an email. And and also the link for Nelia's course. She's developed an online self-paced course that I personally have done and can highly recommend it, especially for social workers and counselors. Please see the link in the chat box. Also, please, if you've got any questions, post your question in the chat box, and we will at the end of the session offer about 10 or 15 minutes, and we will ask the question to Nelia, and she will have opportunity to answer that. Should we not be able to get through all the questions, then we will write them down with the answers and email that out to you as well. So without further ado, Nelia, welcome, and everyone, thank you for being here and enjoy the session.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for this invitation. I think it's a very relevant topic, and I so hope that we will make a bit more of talking about loss and the experience of loss. So without ado, I will go and share my screen. Just one moment. There we are. Can you see it? I hope so. All right.
Yes.
So there's just a little bit of information about myself, but you will receive it when you receive the recording. Loss is an everyday human experience. We experience loss when someone or something is taken away from us, either by choice or by circumstances. It is mostly the involuntary severance of a significant relationship. A significant loss leaves us unable to continue in our accustomed ways. We experience a blend of homesickness, nostalgia, and longing for a home we cannot return to. When loss occurs, our well-defined expectations and the sense of safety is in jeopardy. We are then unable to continue in the accustomed ways. Grief is the response to loss. So, there are many categories of loss. I'm going to give you a few examples. There once was a man who lost his leg in a car accident. There once was a woman who had a miscarriage. There once was a man who lost his job. There once was a couple who went through a divorce. There once was a woman who was raped. There once was a child who was abused by his mother. There once was an older person who had to retire. There once was a family who lost all their belongings in a fire. There once was a woman who lost her handbag. There once was a child who grew up without knowing his parents. There once was a farmer who was killed by 3 armed men. There once was an old man who died. There once was a young woman who died. There once was a woman whose child had died. There once was a man whose wife was in jail. There once was a family who had to bury their dog. There once was a child who was diagnosed with cancer. There once was a family who lost all their finances in the scam. There once was a man who lost his friend because he could not trust him any longer. We lose people, things, activities, places, and dreams through our lives. From a young age, we are taught how to acquire things, but unfortunately, we are not taught how to deal with loss. Just think for a moment. When we are small, we are taught that we have to work hard for what we own. We learn this from the moment our parents give us pocket money, where we save to buy whatever we want. When you start a job, you start saving for that car, the house, the wife, and the kids. We learn how to open bank accounts, how to buy a house, but we are scolded when we lose our lunchboxes or school shoes. We are not taught how to react when thieves steal our stuff, when someone we love dies, when we get old and must retire, when we lose our jobs, or when we are diagnosed with a severe illness. Loss is inevitable, and sometimes loss is predictable. Despite these truths, we receive no formal training in how to respond to events. To say goodbye to people in our lives, I just want to go back. To say goodbye to people in our lives is certainly one of the hardest things to cope with. When loss occurs, our dreams and goals are often shattered. A client came to me for counseling after a retired husband died of COVID shortly after they decided that she will also retire so that they can live their dream to tour South Africa, something they have been looking forward to for many years. Their dream was shattered. Another client who was retrenched explained that his dreams to send his children to university were shattered. Although he did not have control over the situation, he felt that he was useless and that all the years he spent at the company were wasted. Death and bereavement are profoundly life-altering. The path of grief is often dark and ominous when suddenly the griever comes to face with a dragon. According to a Chinese proverb, if he ignores the dragon, it will eat him. If he tries to confront the dragon, it will overpower him. But if he rides the dragon, he will take advantage of its might and power. I want to translate this into, most of us know what it feels like to be at the sea. When you're in the sea and you look at the waves and there's a huge wave coming your way, you have choices. You watch it, you see when it comes closer, you can go with it to the shore, or you can dive underneath, or you can just strengthen yourself and stand firm. This is when you face the emotion, face the loss. When you turn your back to the wave, what happens? It overpowers you. So this is what we actually should do if we experience loss. We look at the loss and we ride this dragon. It's important to recognize the variety of losses that one can experience. A major loss is often referred to as the primary loss, as you can see here in the middle of the screen, where I've used death as the primary loss. But just for a moment, look at all the secondary losses that you experience after a death. And it is all these losses that complicates our experience. You will maybe add some more to these. It's not that all of these will be part of your secondary losses, but most of them will. The challenge is that all of these losses happen simultaneously and demand your attention. In order to sort out your finances, you need a clear mind and not the poor concentration span and the confusion that comes with grief. And that is a frustration to us, and that leaves us hopeless and uncertain. The broad spectrum of losses following the death of a loved one are subjective and are interpreted differently depending upon each person's circumstance and context. When loss occurs, our lives change because our assumptions about the world change. These assumptions are the beliefs that ground, secure, stabilize, and orient people. What is our grief experience? The biblical figure of Jacob stands out as a powerful case history of the impact of child loss and bereavement. You can read about this in Genesis 37, verse 34 and 35. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, in mourning will I go down to the grave to my son. So his father wept for him. As already said, the response to loss occurs whenever our attachments are threatened, harmed, or severed. Grief reactions are universal yet highly individual and include emotional, the top structure there, emotional, physical, behavioural, cognitive, and spiritual reactions. The emotions associated with grief are typically at the forefront. Sadness, anger, anxiety, confusion, helplessness, and loneliness are frequently associated with grief. However, physical, behavioural, and cognitive reactions often surface and include, but are not limited to, headaches, exhaustion, restlessness, inability to concentrate, sleep problems, and mood changes. Additionally, the spiritual aspect of functioning can be impacted while trying to find meaning of what had happened. This table highlights the normal grief reactions. This is what grief looks like, and to try and escape it will never work. To experience grief is not a sign of weakness. We need this built-in psychological process to cope with loss. I always tell my clients when they arrive, I think you are brave. You are brave for making this appointment. You have been brave to confirm the appointment. You were brave to get into your car this morning. You are brave to sit here in front of a stranger and share your innermost experiences. How we perceive death is determined by our familial, cultural, and religious spiritual resources. We can't ignore the role of culture because society decides who grieves for whom, when, where, how, and how long. So quite often a person close to you will say, hey, it's now been 3 months. When do you get over it? Come on, get over it. I have a thing about that, getting over it, and about closure. How can you close the door when you had a significant relationship? Yet, over time, most of us experience the death of a loved one and continue to live a full and productive life, with the acceptance of loss becoming part of it. Recuperating from a significant loss is like any other healing process. It occurs over time and requires considerable energy. Those of you who have gone through loss will remember how tired you were. But remember, every person's loss is different. We find two types of grievers. On the one end of the continuum, we have the people who must do something, the doers. And on the other end, we have those who want to crawl under the duvet and stay there. Most of us, however, move along this continuum, sometimes having the energy to do something, and at other times just sit and do nothing. This is grief. And we all grieve in our own unique ways, although the symptoms or the manifestations of grief are universal. When we have suffered a severe loss, we have to relearn the world. When we survive the loss of a loved one, we are forever changed. We find ways to adapt personally and socially to our altered life situation. Our worldview shifts. Our values sometimes change, as do our priorities. Whether we are aware of doing so or not, we develop a new identity based on these changes, an identity that reflects how we created meaning from our loss and that can give our lives new purpose. Bereavement is all about reorganizing the relationship to someone important to us who is no longer living. It is also reorganizing the relationship to the leg that I have lost. It is reorganizing the relationship to a life-threatening illness that I was diagnosed with. It is the balance of letting go of what can no longer be and maintain the significance and value of the relationship. It sounds easier than done. But if we can achieve the balance and if we can achieve reorganization, we are halfway there. All of us have strengths, and this is what's helping us to cope with grief. We observe our strengths, looking at all that we have endured, how did I manage to get this far with everything that has happened to me? When you look back, you will pick up on the strengths that help you through the whole process. What have you learned about yourself and your world during and after the trauma? Which of these difficulties have given you special strengths, insight, or skill? What are the special qualities on which you can rely? And you will see on this slide there are two categories. You have individual strengths on the one hand, and then also environmental strengths on the other side. Your individual strengths are those aspirations, your goals, your dreams, which may be shattered and will change. Your hopes for the future that have changed. but your ambitions are still there, and the positive motivation to achieve and grow. Your competencies, the talents, the skills, and the intellect that you have. Quite often when I ask people, what are your competencies? They look at me with as if they don't know. These are those things that you are good at. Are you a good crocheter? Can you knit? Do you look after your grandchildren with pleasure? Can you bake? Can you build something? These are your competencies which is not gone after a loss. Usually with loss, we find that our confidence is a bit lower than usual. Pick yourself up, speak to yourself, ask people what they think of you. Believe that you can still achieve goals and tenacity. I had the opportunity to listen to Matthijs Roots on Saturday, and when I listened to his story of how he came through his after his accident and his paralysis, he says, there's always hope. You can still dream, but then you must do. And I really hope that this can help you with picking up. On the environmental strength side, you have resources. Your financial support may be less, but it might be there. You have access to services. You have access to information. And you have access to tangible assets. You have a roof over your head. You have food to eat. Which brings me a little bit about what are we grateful for, even during loss. Do not forget that social relations are very, very important during loss. Do not neglect your friends, your family, your neighbors, your co-workers. I know that they might say, just tell me what you need and I will be there for you. This is a difficult one because we don't always know what we need when we have suffered loss. So if you are a friend, a family, a neighbor, a co-worker of somebody, rather do something. Take the kids to school, bring a basket of food. Do something and don't ask from that person whose mind is already very full to think up new stuff for you to do. And then quite often there's still opportunities and gaps that are waiting to be filled, positive events that can potentially result in change. I know of a woman who have lost her husband and her 2 children in a car accident. 10 years later, she has written a book about her whole experience, but it is such a helpful book. And maybe I can mention a name here, Karen Swanepoel. And her book is in Afrikaans and in English, but I can only remember the Afrikaans one now. Ek sal weer 'n loflied sing. And you can find her on Facebook, Karen Swanepoel, Karen Karen. All right, so let's go further. Let's just see what we have here. We build resilience. And there is a researcher who says that we must also look at the other side of sadness. What does resilience mean? It means to cope with high levels of ongoing disruptive change. Now, when I use the word cope, people will immediately think, but if I cry, I'm not coping. Remember the normal reactions after loss. The normal reactions of grief, that is actually your coping with what has happened. So do not always think that cope must be that mask that I put in front and I go and I live as I have lived all the time. Sustain good health. Make sure that you sustain good health and energy when you are under constant pressure. Resilience means bouncing back from setbacks. It means overcoming adversities. It means change to a new way of working and living when an old way is no longer possible. It's not that easy. It's hard work, but it can be done. And it also means to do all this without acting in a dysfunctional way. The Afrikaans word for resilience is veerkragtig. What a beautiful word. So how can we manage grief, and how can we grow and be resilient through all of this? Stick to your hobbies. Focus on physical activities. It is important to remain active. And I'm not now saying during the acute phase of loss, where everybody just go around and not knowing what's going on. But find your hobby again. Go for a walk. Take the dog for a walk. Take yourself for a walk. Pick up that crochet needle. Look for the woodwork. Take care of your grandchildren. It's the small steps that will help you in this growth process. Contribute to the well-being of others. Reach out to other people, and you will find that yours gets a little bit less important. When I ask people, how did you get here? It's almost 70 to 75% of people that say, it's because of my faith. It is important to connect with your spirituality and your religion. Dialoguing with oneself, journaling, blogging, diarizing, dictating if you can't write anymore. Fortunately, we have the wonderful thing of our phones that can record. Talk to yourself. Put someone, imaginary someone, in the chair opposite you. Write a letter to that person. Speak to them if you can't speak to somebody else. It is important to prepare for those important anniversary dates, birth dates, Christmas dates. Otherwise, the date is going to control you. I've heard many people who said, if I can only cut out this date out of the calendar. We don't need to cut out the date. What we can do is plan for the date and plan for your grief and plan that you will be heartbroken. But put a time limit on it and tell yourself, okay, from 9 to 11, I'm going to bawl it out. Light a candle, fight, do whatever. But then I will do the washing, I will bake a cake, I will go out to lunch. In that way, you take control of the date and not the date of you. Memory work, remember that when we grieve, all that we have left are memories. And the memory work that I'm talking about is open the photo album, make a collage, a memory box, put all those things that are wonderful and that you don't want to give away, put that in a box, and at stages in your life, take that out again. Even if you cry, remember your emotions are part of your healing process. Be mindful. Use your 5 senses to be mindful. As you, wherever you are sitting at the moment, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you smell? What do you feel? And what's the other one? What do you taste? And during that, make sure that you breathe. That you breathe, not just as shallow as we all breathe. So I'm going to tell you, to just give you a little bit of an example of how to breathe is you breathe in through your nose, 1, 2, 3. You hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you breathe out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can quickly practice it. Unfortunately, I cannot count and breathe at the same time. So I'm going to do the counting and you can do the breathing. All right, in through your nose. 1, 2, 3. Hold it there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Blow out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm sure all the time that you have been concentrating on the breathing, you did not think about the losses. But this is what happens. We must sometimes just pause. Self-help groups are very important. If you can find a self-help group, do not force yourself into a self-help group. Just try and be there. And then do not be afraid of counseling and therapy. It is not weak people that go for counseling and therapy. It is brave people who go for counseling and therapy. Before I start this video, I just want to say to you that sometimes we have to care for somebody else who has experienced grief. This is just a little short video of Brené Brown to help you understand what empathy is. We tend to give advice when somebody has experienced loss instead of just be there. So enjoy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
lovely video that you can go and look up on YouTube. You'll find it there. Empathy versus sympathy. So what do we have to be? What do we say to people when we want to comfort them? Words are not just words. They are messages that must be carefully rolled in your mouth before entering the world. And here are a few of the things that people say that causes more harm often than is being helpful. At least, like Brené Brown just said, your baby wasn't even a baby yet. Be strong. You're still young. They're in a better place. Just try again. There are worse things. It wasn't meant to be, and life goes on. Just be careful what you say to somebody. Rather say nothing than any of these things. All right. This is the last video. It's also a lovely video. It is of a man whose wife had died in a car accident while undergoing. This is an example of how he worked through his grief after the death of his wife. This was his way of making sense of her death, sending messages of good hope all over the world.
I got this idea. I would make a little boat out of a tree pod, using a feather as its sail, and attach a message in a bottle. And I'd leave it on the beach for someone to find. The message would be a message of hope. A little boat of hope. Well, I did that. I started making more boats. I started making hundreds. I started making thousands. And I started to leave them everywhere. Something magical is starting to happen. You see it in the people who discover my little boats. You see something in their eyes. You see a childlike wonderment. You see something miraculous. You see a little hope. So many people are in pain, fighting battles we know nothing about. It seems that people are combing the jagged shores of their lives for some kind of a sign, a message in a bottle, telling them everything will be all right. This is just the beginning, just a tiny ripple. But imagine millions upon millions of ripples all coming together. What could they do? They could carve a river through the cliffs of our hatred. They could become a tsunami and wash away the anguish of our souls. Just imagine. I don't know where this journey is taking me, but I have a feeling I'm not alone. I have a feeling we're on it together.
And that has brought me to the end of this presentation. I'm inviting you, for those of you who would like to know more about grief, to go and check out this website. It is an online bereavement counseling course that I've developed for anybody who would like to know a bit more about grief. But you will receive the link as well. So I want to thank you very much once again, Ekklesia Park, for inviting me. I'm going to stop sharing and we can have some questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Nelia. I think this was very touching to all of us and very helpful. We've had a few questions here, and I know you've touched on this, but I'm going to still just mention it. Someone has asked about resources and tools that there may be. I mean, even I know we've posted there, but also just to say that we will, when we send the email out, we'll send, you know, some resources as well. If you can send us, if there's any more that you've got that you can recommend to people, then we can send that out by email. And Denise has also asked the question which you did answer there, but maybe you want to say something about that again, about how to navigate this losses and bereavement through a period of holidays and significant other events, birthdays, Christmas time, those kind of things. So I don't know if there's anything more you will say about that.
I'll quickly say about the resources and tools. There are plenty. Can I quickly get my books? I want to introduce you to 2 books. For the professionals among you, there are 2 very valuable books. Techniques, it's not now going to show. Techniques in Grief Counseling, in Grief Therapy by Robert Neymeyer. I will put it in the chat for you.
Let's put that in the chat,
okay.
Nelia, because
I'll do that in the chat.
Yeah.
I also present workshops on techniques in grief counseling. To give you a list of resources and tools is quite a job. So I would rather that people who would like to know a bit more about resources and tools send me an email, and I can see how I can support you there.
Okay, let's
All
go
right.
to the, thank you for that. So the next question, someone has said that they've recently lost someone close and that it's affecting their work performance, and they wanted to know how to navigate through that.
Yeah, that is a difficult one because you cannot park your grief at the door and then go in to your workplace and be productive as always. But unfortunately, our workplaces quite often expect of us to just continue as it was before. My answer to you would be, please take care of yourself. Take this table that I've mentioned, the normal grief. You will experience normal grief. Tell your co-workers, speak to your boss, ask that they put a grief policy in place. There's no way in our country we get 3 or 5 days family responsibility leave. If you are lucky, you still have another 10 days leave. How can that be enough for you to navigate through your grief and go back to work and be where you were? But people expect of you. But I also want to say, we expect it of ourselves. I want to be exactly the same. You will never be the same. It is a house that you will never be able to go to again. So be kind to yourself, sleep enough, eat correctly, speak to people, cry. Cry in the shower is wonderful because nobody knows that you are crying. And when you get out there with red eyes, you can say it was the shampoo. So just look after yourself and go for counseling if you feel this is too much. Remember, you will be brave in going for counseling.
Nelia, also a question from someone who asked, how would you counsel and support someone, I guess specifically in relation to death, when they are a non-believer or not believing?
Yeah, that's one of the difficult ones because I'm also a Christian, and it is not within my scope of practice to lead somebody, but I would like to know if you believe. I ask a question at some stage during the first 2 sessions while I'm doing the assessment. I ask the question, given everything that has happened to you, how have you managed to get this far? And the Christians will usually tell me, my faith. And then I know, now you can go on the faith road as well. But I had a very difficult experience for me in that it was an engineer, a man of 65, and he said, I just don't believe. Don't come with, how do you know? So he actually challenged my belief. It is difficult, but remember that person is going through the very same normal reactions. It usually takes longer in counseling for a non-believer. That is what I found, because I do not have that force to hang on to. But be careful not to transfer your beliefs onto that person, because that is also his right, although we would not like it to be like that. Be careful for that.
That's a very good answer. Thank you. Then I've got another question here. Will a person experience all the stages of grief, or is it important, is it necessary to experience all the stages of grief, or can I just experience one and be okay?
Now you come to a topic that is close to my heart. There are no stages of grief. Forget about the stages. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed her stages of grief, the 5 stages I suppose you're talking about, denial
Yes.
up to acceptance, for people who are dying. That theory was never tested. There are many more other theories. So please, all of us will at some stage deny what has happened. There's no stages that we go through. it is adapting to what has happened at different times in different ways. In my practice, I use the dual process model of coping with bereavement, and that's actually what we do. We cope for the rest of our lives with what has happened to us. And those of you who are interested can contact me. I can give you, I can put you on my mailing list when I do some courses on workshops on this. But the stages of grief, please do not get caught up in the stages of grief, because it can really harm your adaptation process.
Thank you. And another question, we've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. How can I address feelings of guilt, anger, or regret during the grieving process? And what can I do to move forward in a healthy way, quicker?
Okay,
and
guilt.
There's questions also relating to how can the process be easier?
There is no easy way through grief. It is hard work. Warden has developed the 4 tasks of grief. Now you can hear tasks. Tasks are hard work. It is hard work to navigate through grief, and especially when there are feelings of guilt, anger, and regret, because it's that thing, why did I? What if? That is mulling through your mind, and you cannot get an answer because that other person is not there anymore. You cannot ask for forgiveness. So in the first place, let's not have or let's have the conversations with the loved ones that we should have before they die. But to work through guilt, anger, and regret, writing a letter, writing notes about it can be helpful. But that is, to me, an indication to seek some guidance at a counselor.
Thank you. There's also an interesting question around, I feel like I'm grieving already my loved one and they've not died yet. What do I do?
Okay. If this is a person who has been, or you're grieving somebody who is now very ill, that
maybe
is
related to the fear of a person dying.
Those are 2 different things. If you're feeling like this and there's a person who has a terminal illness at this stage, we call that anticipatory grief. You are already going through a part of your grief, and you will experience it again after the person died. If you have a fear that your loved ones will die, I would suggest that you also look for counseling for that, because maybe something from your past is triggering that now, and that is not good to live in fear in case somebody dies. I know in our country we're just not sure of our lives every day, but it's still a beautiful country. It's still a beautiful place to live in. And we need not fear what is not happening at the moment. So please seek some counseling.
Thank you. And Dr. Nelia, is there a difference between grief and mourning?
Oh my goodness. That's been a question I've asked myself over and over again, because it's only in the English language that you get the grief and mourning. In Afrikaans, it is rou. And I don't know the other languages, but we don't in Afrikaans have 2 words. For me, in a way, it is similar. Grief is what I experience at the moment, and mourning is what I go through. So a little bit of semantics around that, which I haven't worked out for myself yet, because I've asked myself the question, why do you want to know that? Because grief is grief, and that's a process that we're going through. it's a process actually that never ends, because the loved ones are not cut off. There will always be some memory that we will remember. Sorry if I didn't answer the person.
No, you answered it. Thank you so much. Yes, I think, thank you. You've answered most of the questions here very well, and you've covered quite a bit. Thank you so much for considering that we just had an hour. Thank you again to everyone that is logged in and joined us today. We've got a large group here on today, and we do appreciate each and every one of you and want to encourage you. If you experience anything or whatever Nelia shared has triggered anything in you, please seek help. Please seek help. Please seek support. It's available. Her email and address is also on the chat box, and you can email her, and if she can direct you. So thank you, everyone, and this is it for today. And we has recorded this and will send it out to everyone. If there's any more questions, please feel free to email us or Dr. Trent. Yes, you can email also info. We can put that on as well, as please, info@ekklesiapark.co.za. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Blessings.
Bye.
Bye-bye.